In 1983, researchers at the University of Waikato tested 2 jars of honey, one from a commercial supermarket shelf, one from a traditional unheated hive managed the old way. The commercial honey showed almost no antibacterial effect. The traditional honey killed multi-resistant staphylococcus bacteria in laboratory conditions that available antibiotics were failing to control. The finding was significant enough that researchers began developing medical-grade honey for clinical wound treatment. That medical honey is not what you buy at the supermarket. It is cold-processed, never heated, sourced from specific plant varieties, and it costs 10 times more than the jar on your shelf. Medieval honey was that medical grade, every single jar. Not because medieval beekeepers were more skilled, because they had not yet learned how to ruin it. The jar in your kitchen cupboard cannot do what that traditional honey did. Not chemically, not biologically, and the industry that produced it knows exactly why. What you are about to watch has a paper trail, documented decisions, named commercial interests, and when someone tells you this is exaggeration, you will be able to tell them exactly which university ran the study and which decade the industry made the decision that made your honey jar biologically inactive. Subscribe to this channel right now before we go further, because this is where the argument starts, and it does not end with honey. Honey found in Egyptian tombs 3,000 years old was still chemically intact when archaeologists opened them. No refrigeration, no preservatives. Medieval monastery physicians applied honey directly to infected wounds and documented the results in records that survive today. They were not applying a condiment. They were applying the most effective antimicrobial substance available to them, and it worked. Not because of superstition, because of a biological complexity that the modern honey industry systematically removed for commercial reasons that had nothing to do with your health. Medieval bees were not managed, they were tolerated. A beekeeper in 14th century Germany set up a hive, protected it from predators, and once a year in late summer removed some of the combs. That was the full extent of his involvement. The bees built according to their own instincts. They chose what to eat, and what they ate determined everything. According to historical apiary records, a medieval beehive in a diverse European landscape collected nectar from well over 100 different plant species across a single season: linden, willow, blackberry, clover, thyme, lavender, fruit trees, each plant contributing different enzymes, different pollen, different essential oils, different phytochemicals. The result was honey of genuine biological complexity: flavonoids, phenolic acids, glucose oxidase, hundreds of bioactive compounds working together. That honey was alive. Studies of medieval skeletal remains document significantly lower rates of tooth decay in populations using honey as their primary sweetener compared to later populations consuming refined sugar. Honey was not simply safe for teeth, it actively protected them. That protection came from the biological complexity of unprocessed honey, compounds that modern processing removes before the jar reaches your shelf. Now look at what the modern commercial hive produces instead. Bees are loaded onto trucks, transported to vast monoculture fields: rapeseed, sunflowers, acacia, one source, millions of identical plants, nothing else within foraging range. The honey they produce is chemically simple, high in sugar, minimal phytochemicals, no biological diversity, no biological complexity. And many commercial beekeepers feed their colonies sugar syrup when the harvest has been maximized and nothing remains for the bees themselves. The bees store that industrial sugar in the combs, mixed with real nectar. What you buy contains both. Medieval beekeepers always left sufficient honey in the hive for the colony to survive winter. They understood instinctively that bees fed on their own honey produced something fundamentally different from bees fed on industrial sugar. The modern industry understood that too, and chose profit over biological integrity regardless. I appreciate you still watching this video. I need you to subscribe to this channel and give us a thumbs up if you are gaining value from the information so far, because what you are watching is the pattern this channel exists to document, one product at a time. A biologically active food, stripped to its commercial skeleton, sold back to you under the original name. Subscribe and keep watching. Back to our story. Medieval honey was harvested one of two ways: combs cut from the hive, placed in cloth over a bowl, allowed to drip at room temperature, or combs gently crushed by hand, pressed through linen. No heat, no machinery. The honey flowed cold, filtered only through coarse fabric that retained wax debris but allowed pollen, propolis, and every bioactive compound to pass through intact. That honey crystallized after weeks or months, and that crystallization was confirmation. Real, unprocessed honey crystallizes. It is the natural behavior of intact glucose. It is evidence that nothing has been done to it. The modern factory begins with the same honey and produces something biologically unrecognizable. The combs are centrifuged, the honey extracted, then heated, 60 degrees Celsius, 70, sometimes 80, to make it flow faster through industrial pipes, to prevent crystallization, because consumers have been conditioned to associate liquid honey with freshness and crystallized honey with spoilage. That conditioning is commercially convenient, and biologically, it is the opposite of true. The heat destroys what cannot be replaced. The enzyme diastase becomes inactive above 40 degrees Celsius. Glucose oxidase, which produces the antibacterial hydrogen peroxide activated when honey contacts a wound, is destroyed at 50 degrees Celsius. B vitamins decompose. Antioxidant flavonoids lose their biological activity. What remains after heating is sugar, fructose and glucose, chemically present, biologically inactive. Then comes ultrafiltration, the heated honey pressed through microscopically fine filters, removing not just wax, removing pollen. Here is why that matters directly to you. Pollen identifies the geographical origin of honey. Pollen analysis reveals which country, which region the honey came from. The industry removes pollen because significant quantities of commercial honey are adulterated. Honey from regions with minimal quality controls is routed through third countries, relabeled, and sold as premium product. Real honey is diluted with rice syrup, corn syrup, or synthetic invert sugar. Pollen analysis exposes that adulteration immediately, so the pollen disappears, and with it, proteins, amino acids, B vitamins, minerals, and immunomodulatory compounds that formed a significant part of the biological value of real honey. And then there is what the label will never tell you. Studies conducted across European commercial honey samples have found glyphosate residues in over 70% of products tested. Glyphosate, the agricultural herbicide most directly associated in research with gut microbiome disruption, present in the jar you reached for this morning, the jar you believed was a natural product. Additionally, commercial honey is routinely stored in plastic containers and metal drums for months before reaching retail. Research has raised concerns about bisphenol A migration from plastic storage into food products, a compound associated with hormonal disruption in laboratory studies, though the specific dose from honey storage has not been definitively established. What is established is this: the product in your jar has been heated past the point of biological activity, filtered past the point of nutritional completeness, and stored in conditions that raise documented contamination concerns. It shares a name with what medieval monastery physicians applied to infected wounds. It does not share the biology. Here is what that biological difference does to your body specifically. Medieval honey had a measured glycemic response, not because it contained less sugar, because the intact enzymes, proteins, and pollen slowed sugar absorption. Blood sugar rose gradually, evenly. Your modern honey behaves like refined table sugar. Rapid blood sugar rise, insulin spike, energy crash. No antibacterial activity, no anti-inflammatory effect, no enzymatic function. Researchers at the Technical University of Dresden documented medieval honey recipes from monastery archives and compared their compound profiles with modern commercial products. Medieval honey contained over 300 identifiable bioactive compounds. Modern supermarket honey, between 40 and 60. Those compounds are not flavoring, they are biologically active molecules, interacting with your digestive system and immune system simultaneously. A biologically complete honey produces a coordinated physiological response. A biologically stripped honey is recognized by your body as simple sugar and processed exactly that way. Here is the honest question this video ends with, not the prepared answer. The real one. The honey in your kitchen right now was heated past the temperature that destroyed its enzymes, filtered to remove the pollen that connected it to its origin. And in the majority of tested commercial samples across Europe, it carries glyphosate residue from the monoculture fields the bees worked. You reached for it this week. You believed you were making a natural choice. How long has that jar been in your kitchen, and how many times have you eaten it, believing it was doing something for your body that it was no longer biologically capable of doing? Drop that honest answer in the comments right now, not the answer that sounds informed, the real one. Because the gap between what honey was and what industrial processing made it is the gap this channel exists to document. And your answer tells this channel exactly how personally that gap has landed. The honey story is not isolated. Strip the biology, heat the product, filter the evidence, contaminate the supply chain, sell the result under the name of the original. Then, when the result produces blood sugar dysfunction, inflammation, and an immune system that no longer recognizes real food, sell supplements to manage each symptom separately. Medieval honey was an antibacterial agent, an anti-inflammatory, a wound treatment, and an immune activator in a single jar. Your modern honey jar delivers fructose and glucose. The biological complexity that centuries of natural selection built into that product was removed in the 20th century because complexity does not flow efficiently through industrial pipes. That decision was not made for your benefit. It was made because biologically dead honey is easier to process, cheaper to produce, and more profitable to sell than living honey. And the industry that made that decision has been counting on you never making the comparison this video just made. Subscribe now and turn on your notification bell before you move on, because this channel is not finished. There are products in your kitchen that were once biologically active and are now hollow versions of what they replaced. This channel uncovers them one at a time, with evidence, with documented decisions, with the commercial paper trail those industries are counting on you never following. Do not leave without subscribing. This is the channel they are counting on you never finding. Medieval honey kept infections at bay that modern processing cannot replicate. The industry that replaced it understood exactly what it was removing. It removed it anyway. Now you know what was in that jar. The question is what you do with that knowledge. Stay tuned for our next video.